I've been here before. Over and over again, and each time the same question. Is this it?
Cage. Andromache the Scythian, the Eternal Warrior.
In the quiet streets of Morocco, Andy, a seasoned assassin and leader of a four-person team, makes her way to meet Booker, one of her teammates. It's been a year since she last saw any of them. Booker greets her warmly, Andy smiles and presents him with a first edition of Don Quixote. Without wasting time, she asks why he contacted her. Booker reveals that James Copley, a CIA agent who had hired them 8 years ago, recently reached out to him regarding a hostage situation in South Sudan involving children. Booker adds that James now works freelance, having resigned from the agency. Andy bluntly reminds him that they don't take repeat jobs, but Booker persuades her to at least consult with the rest of the team. She agrees, and the two head to the hotel where the others are staying. While Booker checks them in, Andy is inadvertently caught on a tourist's selfie. She approaches the group, offers to take their photo, deletes the one with herself in it, and walks away. Joe and Nikki greet their leader. The group then settles on a sofa, catching up. They also play a fun game where Andy guesses the ingredients from the food Nikki has brought. Everyone bets on Andy, as she always guesses correctly, except Nikki. True to form, she nails it, and the group erupts in laughter and cheers. Booker gently brings up the job again, saying it could make a difference. Andy, however, doubts whether what they do really helps the world. Nikki reassures her, it's what they do, even if it only makes a small difference. In the end, Andy agrees to take on the mission. Andy and Booker go to meet James Copley, while Joe and Nikki discreetly keep watch from a distance. After a brief greeting, Andy cuts to the chase and asks why James left the CIA. He pauses, then tells her his wife died of ALS. The loss, he says, made him see things differently. Clearing his throat, James explains that 17 schoolchildren were abducted at gunpoint by a local militia. The South Sudanese government appealed to the U.S. for help, but the request was denied. Unwilling to stand by, a few of James's former CIA colleagues decided to take matters into their own hands and asked for his assistance. That's when he reached out to Booker, because, as he puts it, their team is the best on the market. James adds that he is located where the children are supposedly being held and warns they may be moved soon. Andy simply tells him they'll take the job and invoice the price later. The next day, the team flies to a remote region of South Sudan, heavily armed. From there, they continue on foot. As night falls, Andy and her team approach the building where the children are allegedly being kept. They stealthily take out the guards stationed outside. After breaching the entrance with explosives, they enter, only to find the place empty. Andy realizes too late that it was a trap. The team is ambushed and shot down, but the masked attackers don't know the truth. Andy, Booker, Joe, and Nikki are no ordinary assassins. They are immortal warriors with the ability to heal themselves. Moments later, the team rises and retaliates with brutal efficiency, wiping out their attackers. After the fight, Andy notices surveillance cameras and immediately realizes the whole mission was a setup. There were never any children. James Copley betrayed them. She destroys the cameras, but Copley has already captured the footage. The team regroups to decide their next move. Andy, visibly frustrated, reminds them that she never wanted to take this job in the first place. Booker, regretful, admits that he ran a background check on James, and everything seemed legitimate. Still cynical, Andy questions whether any of what they do actually makes a difference. Determined, Andy announces that they need to find Copley and tie up the loose ends. She also declares she's done taking on any more jobs.
The world can burn for all I care.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, a U.S. Marine named Niall Freeman hands out candy to kids, hoping to brighten their day a little. Later, she and her unit go door to door seeking information on a suspected terrorist believed to be hiding nearby. Most of the frightened women refuse to speak, but one middle-aged woman subtly glances toward a nearby house. Niall catches the signal and alerts her team to take position. Niall enters the house and shoots the suspect, then calls in for medical support. While she tries to stop the bleeding, the terrorist slashes her throat with a knife. As Niall begins to lose consciousness, her teammate reassures her she'll be okay. Niall faints. On a freight train, Andy and her group are resting when they all simultaneously get a vision of Niall. The group begins to suspect that Niall may be the next immortal warrior. Joe attempts to sketch the woman he saw in the vision. The team then discusses possible clues to her location. Booker mentions seeing an older woman wearing a hijab, while Nikki recalls that the woman had a name tag starting with the word free. Andy pieces it together, concluding that the woman is likely a Marine specializing in combat duty, probably stationed in Afghanistan. She then voices her concern, noting that it's been over 200 years since the last Immortal appeared, and she wonders why another has surfaced now. Booker argues that they should stay focused on finding James Copley, but Nikki reminds him how overwhelming it can be to discover you're immortal, especially when you're alone and afraid. Andy volunteers to retrieve the new Immortal herself. She instructs the others to head to their safe house in France and focus on tracking down James. Without hesitation, she jumps off the train. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, Niall awakens, startled by visions of the immortal warriors. Outside, her friend expresses disbelief that Niall survived such a fatal wound.
You'd rather we sent her home in a body bag? Of course not. So come on.
They go inside the camp and greet Niall. One of her friends notices that she doesn't even have a scratch on her neck where she was attacked. Niall lies, saying the medics performed skin graft surgery. But under their stares, Niall feels exposed, like everyone's watching her too closely. Overwhelmed, she walks out. Elsewhere in London, James Copley attends a shareholder conference where Merrick, the CEO of Merrick Pharmaceuticals, presents his company's research on extending human life. Merrick acknowledges the research is costly and appeals to the shareholders for more investment.
Our research on telomere extension has reversed the chromosomal clock of human stem cells. Dr. Kozak's manipulation of the clotho hormone will in time completely arrest common cognitive decline.
After the conference, James hands over video evidence of the Immortals in action. But Merrick isn't impressed. He demands solid proof and orders James to capture them. When James warns that they're nearly impossible to contain, Merrick assigns his ex-Special Forces bodyguard, Keen, to assist. Later that afternoon, Niall tries to distract herself from the overwhelming thoughts by working out. Her commanding officer arrives and informs her that the higher-ups are sending her to Germany for further medical tests. When Niall returns to pack her things, she discovers her bags have already been packed. What hurts more is that her friends now refuse to even speak with her. She grabs her phone and puts on music to cope with the isolation. Suddenly, Andy appears and swiftly incapacitates the soldiers guarding the area.
Who are you? Andromache the Scythian. Me, Andy.
Shortly afterward, Andy drives away in a truck with an unconscious Niall in the back. Eventually, Niall regains consciousness and, in a panic, kicks open the back door and falls onto the road. Andy brings the truck to a stop, gets out, and, without a word, shoots Niall in the head. To Niall's horror and confusion, she wakes up moments later. Stunned, she asks how she's still alive. Andy promises to explain everything if Niall gets back in the truck. Reluctantly, Niall agrees, and they drive to a hangar where they board a plane. Niall asks where they're going. Andy answers, Paris. Shortly after, Andy contacts Booker to ask if he's found any leads on James. He replies that he hasn't.
I have the new one.
And?
Well, she stabbed me, so I think she has potential.
After ending the call, Andy steps back into the plane, grabs a bottle of alcohol, and takes a drink as the plane lifts off slowly. She then notices Niall praying. Coldly, Andy remarks, God doesn't exist.
God does.
There was a time when I was worshipped as a god.
Niall then questions how many immortals are currently out there. Andy replies, 4. But Niall scoffs, clearly skeptical of Andy's theory about immortals. She begins to suspect that this is all an elaborate setup.
That was a blank that you shot me with.
And I was the one who cut your throat.
Andy advises her to get some rest. Later, she wakes up to find her hands tied. Niall now has the plane's captain at gunpoint. Calmly, Andy asks the captain, Andre, to come and untie her, but Niall threatens to shoot him. Andy then mutters something in Russian and unexpectedly shoots the captain. Startled and confused, Niall doesn't know what to do. Andy, unfazed, tells her that she can fly the plane. Reluctantly, Niall unties her.
You don't speak Russian, do you? Because I told the pilot to play dead.
The two engage in a fierce fight. In the end, Andy manages to subdue Niall. Andy tells her, "You did well," and asks for her name.
Niall.
Niall notices that her wounds are already healing. Quietly, she tells Andy that she has a family who will worry if she doesn't return, and a job. But Andy warns her that if she does return, the military will lock her away and experiment on her. Eventually, they reach the safe house, an abandoned church located just outside of Paris. Later, over an awkward lunch, Niall asks the group why she had visions of them. Joe explains that it means they were destined to meet. He adds that the last time they had a vision like that was when they found Booker in 1812. Booker shares that he died fighting alongside Napoleon but came back to life. Joe reveals that he and Nikki met during the Crusades. They were enemies who kept killing each other until, eventually, they fell in love. Niall assumes Andy is the oldest, and Andy confirms it, though she admits she can't even remember when she was born. Niall concludes that immortals can never die, but Andy corrects her, explaining that there's always a chance they can. She tells her that one of the immortals, Lycon, died long ago, proof that their time isn't endless. There's an invisible clock ticking for each of them. One day, without warning, their wounds might stop healing, and when that happens, it's over. Later that night, Niall wakes up screaming from a nightmare. The group encourages her to share what she saw. Niall reveals she dreamt of a woman trapped in an iron coffin beneath the sea, drowning and dying over and over again, only to come back to life each time. She adds that the woman seemed to have gone insane, endlessly pounding on the iron walls. Andy listens quietly from the hall. Nikki solemnly tells Niall that the woman she saw is Quinn, one of them. Joe adds that Quinn was the first immortal Andy met. They had each other in those lonely moments, running through the world together and fighting thousands of battles side by side. But during the 14th century in England, Andy and Quinn were accused of witchcraft after trying to free heretics from cruel persecution. They were prosecuted over and over again, yet each time they survived the punishment and returned to life no matter how brutal the execution. Originally, they were both sentenced to be burned. However, when they kept coming back to life, the authorities decided to separate them. Quinn was taken first, sealed in an iron coffin and thrown into the sea, doomed to never resurface. Shortly after, Andy managed to escape. Joe explains that for decades, Andy searched endlessly for Quinn but never found her, and to this day, she still blames herself. Andy enters the room and Niall, curious, asks why she holds herself responsible. Andy quietly replies, "I lost a soldier." Niall says she can feel Quinn's rage. Nikki adds that this is the reason why it's dangerous for immortals to be captured, because they could be imprisoned for eternity, just like Quinn. Niall leaves the room, and Andy follows her outside. Meanwhile, James and Merrick's men have tracked down the immortals' hideout. Frustrated, Niall says she doesn't want to be part of this. Andy admits she once felt the same, but says that no one can change destiny. She promises the group will keep her safe. Niall shoots back. "Like Quinn?" Just then, an explosion rocks the hideout. They rush inside to find Booker severely injured. Andy quickly orders Niall to search the back rooms. She waits anxiously until Booker comes back to life. To her relief, he does. Niall returns and reports that there's no one else in the back. Booker tells them he only heard the sound of a grenade before he was knocked out. Andy is now certain James Copley is coming for them. She instructs the others to stay put until she gives the signal to move. Andy waits in silence. The moment she spots the masked men, she strikes, taking them out with ruthless precision. Watching the mission fall apart, James tells Keen they should retreat and cut their losses. Meanwhile, Booker and Niall begin moving after receiving Andy's signal. They move and Niall is stunned by the aftermath. coming upon the bodies of the attackers and realizing that Andy had taken them all down by herself. The trio escapes in a car, but Nikki and Joe aren't as lucky. Nikki is injured, and as Joe gently asks if he's okay, the soldiers mock them, sneering, "What are you, boyfriends?"
You're a child. Your mocking is thus infantile. He's not my boyfriend. This man is more to me than you can dream. He's the moon when I'm lost in darkness and warmth when I shiver in cold, and his kiss still thrills me even after a millennium. He's all and he's more.
An hour later, the two are taken to a private plane. The next morning, Andy drives to an abandoned cave. She reveals to Niall that this is where she keeps her stuff. Niall explores the cave and comes across an antique rodent sculpture.
Is this the Rodin?
Yeah.
Wait, did you know him?
Probably biblically.
Then Andy asks Booker to try and track the location of James. That afternoon, in England, Merrick greets Joe and Nikki warmly. After introducing himself, he explains that his company is focused on developing breakthrough medicines and believes their immortal genetics could unlock cures and extend life. Then, out of nowhere, Joe headbutts him. Unfazed, Merrick admits he's seen their healing abilities on video. However, he claims he prefers solid evidence and begins stabbing Joe. Kozak, the lead doctor, is amazed at how quickly Joe's wound heals and tells Merrick that this discovery would undoubtedly earn them a Nobel Prize. Shortly after, both Joe and Nikki are tased and brought back to the lab. Concerned, James confronts Merrick and reminds him that their mission was for the sake of science, not profit or cruelty. But Merrick coldly dismisses him and orders James to capture the remaining two. Back in the mine, Andy urges Booker to work faster, but he reveals that James has left no digital trail to follow. Suddenly, Andy notices blood seeping from her shoulder. She quickly makes up an excuse and tells them she's stepping outside for some fresh air. Niall quietly tests her healing ability by burning herself, watching in awe as the wound closes. Booker notices but says nothing. Instead, he asks if Niall has anyone she cares about. She replies, "My family." Booker shares that he had 3 sons. His youngest, he says softly, was the last to die, of cancer, at 42. He tells Niall that the only way to live with that kind of loss is to keep moving forward. The hardest part of being immortal, he says, is watching the people you love suffer and die. And when those people discover your secret, they beg you to share it. But when you tell them you don't know how, they would turn on you, calling you selfish, their eyes filled with hate and despair. That's something, he says, you never forget. Meanwhile, Andy walks into a drugstore to get medical supplies. When she hears a police siren, she asks the woman at the counter if there's a bathroom. The woman says no, but offers to help bandage her wound. While tending to her, Andy blurts out, "You didn't ask where the wound came from." The woman simply replies that she's helping because she hopes one day Andy will do the same for someone else. After thanking her, Andy leaves the store and gets into her car. Her mind flashes back to centuries ago, where she and Quinn desperately tried to stop Lycon from bleeding out. But Lycon calmly told them, "It is time." Back in London, Joe and Nikki are being tortured by Kozak and other doctors. James once again pleads with Merrick, saying they already have DNA, blood, and tissue samples of the Immortals. There's no need to keep torturing them. But Merrick dismisses him, saying he can't allow his products to walk free, or they might fall into the hands of his competitors. Early the next morning, Niall wakes up with a start. To calm her mind, she goes outside for some fresh air and finds Andy with her phone. Andy asks Niall, "Where is your father?" Niall replies that he was killed in action when she was 11 and shows Andy a photo of him. She tells Andy about the struggles her mother faced, how she never backed down and fought for Niall and her brother. That's what she taught them, too. Never back down from any difficulty.
You come from work.
Andy admits she can't even remember what her mother or sisters looked like. She talks about Quinn, how she broke a promise, and now vows to bring Joe and Nikki back, no matter what it takes. Just then, Booker arrives and says he's found James's location. The trio heads to London and later parks in front of his house. Booker hands Andy a gun and leaves to scout around the back. Niall, however, tells Andy she can't do this anymore. She adds that she could never be like Andy, killing all those men in the church without mercy. With her mind made up, Niall says she still has a good 30 years left with her family. Andy doesn't argue. She simply hands her a gun, her expression unreadable, and instructs her to take the car and ditch the weapons by the side of the road. Andy rejoins Booker, who asks where Niall is. Andy simply replies,
You and me, Buck. Now and always.
Meanwhile, Niall stops the car in the middle of the road to ditch the weapons, only to find them empty. She quickly realizes that Booker is setting them up. Back with Andy and Booker, they find James inside his room. Andy raises her gun and demands, Where are they? Suddenly, Booker shoots her in the stomach and ties her up. James Copley reveals the real reason why he betrayed them. He tells Andy that after his wife died, he began researching her and the other immortals, tracing their history back through centuries. He believes the immortals could help end suffering and disease and save people like his wife. Booker then realizes that Andy isn't healing. Shocked, he approaches her, but she lashes out, furious at what she sees as betrayal. Booker argues that if Merrick can discover how they heal, he might also uncover how to reverse the process, something Andy once desired.
Buck, what have you done? Not like this, Buck.
Suddenly, Merrick and his men storm into James's house. Spotting Andy wounded, Merrick demands to know why she isn't healing. Booker answers simply, she's lost her immortality. Merrick's men knock both Andy and Booker unconscious.
I'm sorry.
James begs them to let Andy go since she's no longer immortal, but they knock him out too. Andy and Booker are taken to a research facility. There, Booker immediately informs Joe and Nikki that Andy has stopped healing. Shortly after, Merrick enters the room and orders Dr. Kozak to determine what's changed in Andy's physiology since she was healing normally in South Sudan. But now, something's clearly changed. As Kozak stabilizes Andy, Nikki calmly tells Merrick, all things die. The only reason we're still alive is because it's not yet our time. But Merrick says he doesn't care. Meanwhile, Niall arrives at James's house and demands to know where Andy and Booker are. When James asks who she is, she replies, one of the immortals. James reveals they are in the lab and admits he had been wrong about Merrick, who actually cares more about exploiting their immortality than what good they've done with it. James explains that back in Montenegro in 1916, Andy saved a family of refugees. One of their daughters went on to discover a method for early diabetes detection. Later, her grandson saved hundreds during the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. And that's just one chain reaction. Joe, Nikki, and Booker have also saved lives that led to important scientific and humanitarian breakthroughs. He concludes by saying, every life they save creates ripples. 2-3 generations down the line, humanity reaps the benefits. Enraged, Niall asks why, despite knowing all this, James gave them up. He replies honestly, he was trying to gift the humanity a cure for the disease that took his wife.
Wasn't your gift to give.
James then wonders aloud why Andy's immortality would end. Niall is shocked to discover that Andy lost her power. That afternoon, James takes Niall to Merrick's company. Once inside, Niall prepares herself. James warns her there are at least 30 armed guards on site. He grabs a gun, ready to join her, but Niall stops him, reminding him he doesn't have the advantage she has. After getting the floor number and a key card, Niall enters the elevator. She arrives on the 15th floor and is immediately gunned down by the guards. Niall recovers quickly and takes the guards by surprise. Watching the chaos unfold on surveillance, Keen orders his men to find and secure Merrick. Meanwhile, in the lab, Joe finds out that it was Booker who betrayed them. Enraged, he lashes out. Booker defends himself, saying that while Joe and Nikki had each other, he and Andy only had grief. That's why he tried to end the cycle of pain. Meanwhile, Niall continues fighting her way through the building. Keen escorts Merrick to the penthouse located on the top floor. Niall eventually reaches the lab and knocks out Dr. Kozak. She hands a gun to Andy, reminding her of the promise she made earlier. Whatever it takes. With renewed energy, Andy frees the others. Nikki, concerned, asks if she's okay. Andy reassures him that nothing has changed. They're walking out of there, like always, together. The group infiltrates deeper into the company, taking down guards as they go. Suddenly, a grenade explodes, knocking everyone to the ground. Booker and Niall quickly help Andy up to her feet. Booker then informs Joe and Nikki they are helping Andy and leaves the room. As Niall and Booker cautiously take out the guards, Andy breaks through the glass and wrenches the axe from the wall, then begins cutting through enemies with brutal efficiency. Meanwhile, Joe and Nikki regain consciousness and resume the fight. Back with Andy, she takes down a guard in an impressive display of hand-to-hand combat. Then she questions him about Merrick's location. The guard reveals that Merrick is on the top-floor penthouse. The team splits into two and heads toward Merrick's penthouse from different directions. Meanwhile, Merrick opens a case containing Andy's weapon, clearly impressed. Keen is informed that the Immortals are en route to the penthouse. Outside, Niall offers to lead the charge, but Andy insists, "I always go first." At that moment, Joe comes crashing through the penthouse window, taking out several guards, while Andy and Niall storm in from the front. After neutralizing the security team, Nikki spots Merrick trying to flee. The group chase him, while Niall stays with Andy. Andy reflects that perhaps Niall appeared in her life right when she lost her immortality for a reason. She admits that she had lost faith in humanity, but Niall reminded her that some people are still worth fighting for. Just then, Merrick reappears, aiming a gun in Andy's direction.
Hey, Niall, do you think he speaks Russian?
Then Andy attacks him, and Niall leaps in, tackling Merrick. The two of them plunge through the broken window and fall 15 stories. Nikki rushes to help Niall from the rubble. Once she's on her feet, Niall hands Andy her axe. The team quickly leaves the scene before the police can arrive. A few weeks later, the group discusses Booker's punishment for betraying them. Later, Niall joins him. When he asks if they've made a decision, she tells him they're still discussing it. Then Niall quietly tells Booker that James has arranged to make it look like she died in a mission like her father. She admits it will hurt her loved ones, but believes that if they think she's truly gone, they'll be able to grieve and eventually move on. Booker sincerely tells her, "You'll be a great addition to this team." Shortly after, Andy meets with Booker to deliver his punishment. He's exiled from the group 100 years from now. When that time is up, she tells him, this place will be where they reunite. She adds, "I'll miss you," and they share a heartfelt hug. Later, the group visits James's home and is impressed by the depth of research he's done on them. Andy then decides to entrust James with two critical responsibilities: assigning them missions that align with their moral code, and ensuring their existence remains a secret by erasing any digital or physical footprint. 6 months pass. One evening, a now solitary and drunken Booker returns to his apartment, only to find an intruder waiting for him. It's Quinn, alive, standing, and calmly sipping a glass of water.